Owen and Cass, trapped in the daily grind. Their lives in Leeds were a monotonous cycle of work and bills, with each day blending into the next. They craved escape from the grey walls of their office and the endless spreadsheets. One evening, while browsing online, they stumbled upon a video that changed everything. Van life, the allure of the open road, stunning landscapes and freedom. Could this be their answer? They devoured every video, every blog post, dreaming of a life unbound by routine. They poured their savings into a second-hand van, envisioning a new beginning. Every hour of work brought them closer to their escape, fueling their hope for a brighter future. Finally the day arrived, the day they left Leeds behind. The open road stretched before them, full of promise. The van was packed with essentials, including their favourite enamel mugs. They were free. The countryside rolled by, a tapestry of greens and golds, whispering tales of adventure. On one crisp autumn day their travels took them to the enchanting landscapes of Wales. The air was filled with the scent of pine and the crunch of golden leaves underfoot. They came across a weathered sign, half hidden by ivy. Hollow Road, use at own risk. Owen, ever the adventurer, was intrigued by the promise of mystery and the unknown. The clearing was a haven, a secluded spot surrounded by towering trees, and bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. Owen pulled the van into the centre, the crunch of gravel loud in the stillness, echoing through the dense forest. "Perfect," Owen grinned, stepping out of the van and stretching, his eyes scanning the serene surroundings. "What do you reckon, Cass? Best pitch yet?" he asked, his voice filled with excitement. Cass hesitated, her gaze sweeping over the clearing, taking in the shadows that seemed to stretch and twist with the fading light. "It's quiet," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper, a hint of unease creeping into her tone. Owen, oblivious to her apprehension, began unloading the camping gear, eager to settle in for the night. Darkness fell quickly, blanketing the clearing in an oppressive gloom. The dense trees seemed to close in, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out. Inside the van, Owen and Cass huddled around their small camping stove, the only source of warmth and light. The flickering flame cast eerie shadows on the walls, making the confined space feel even more claustrophobic. "Spooky out there," Owen commented, glancing nervously at the window. Cass nodded silently, her eyes darting around as if expecting to see something, or someone, lurking in the darkness. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a chill running down her spine. The scratching sound intensified, accompanied by a soft thudding noise. Owen froze, his hand inches from the door handle. The air inside the van seemed to crackle with tension, as if the very atmosphere was charged with electricity. The door swung open, revealing a wall of impenetrable darkness, the kind that seemed to swallow all light. Then a low growl, guttural and primal, echoed from the darkness, sending shivers down Owen's spine. Owen stumbled back, his face a mask of terror, his mind racing with thoughts of the unknown horrors lurking just beyond the threshold. The silence was broken, and the nightmare had only just begun. Dawn broke over Black Hollow, casting an eerie glow through the dense forest. Owen and Cass emerged from the van, their faces drawn and pale from a restless night. Scratched into the side of the van, deep gouges in the paintwork, were strange symbols, runes ancient and foreboding. Cass whispered, her voice trembling, "Owen, look!" He ran his fingers over the grooves, his brow furrowed in confusion, trying to decipher their meaning. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. "We need to get out of here," Cass said, her voice tight with urgency. Owen hesitated, his gaze fixed on the runes etched into the ancient tree. "It's probably nothing," he said finally, his voice lacking conviction. He turned the key in the ignition. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died, echoing through the dense, eerie forest. Cass checked her phone. No signal. Panic welled up inside her, threatening to overwhelm her as the mist thickened around them. Nightfall brought no relief. The dense forest around them seemed to close in, shadows dancing in the moonlight. Cass woke with a start, her heart pounding. Something wasn't right. The van was moving, but they were supposed to be parked for the night. She reached out and shook Owen awake, her voice trembling. "Owen!" she whispered urgently. "Wake up! Something's wrong!" He groggily reached for the handbrake, his fingers closing around the cold metal. It was still engaged, confirming their worst fears. Owen scrambled to the front of the van, his heart pounding in his chest. The engine was off, the key still in his pocket, cold and useless. Yet the van was moving, gliding silently through the dense fog. The fog outside was thick, swirling like ghostly tendrils, obscuring everything beyond the windscreen. He looked back at Cass, her eyes wide with fear, his face a mask of disbelief and growing terror. They were no longer in control, the van seemingly possessed by an unseen force dragging them deeper into the unknown. The van lurched to a stop, throwing Owen and Cass against their seats. The sudden jolt was like a punch to the gut, leaving them breathless. The engine coughed and died, plunging them into darkness. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by their ragged breaths. Owen fumbled for the torch, his hand shaking. His fingers felt numb, as if the cold had seeped into his very bones. He shone it out of the window, but the fog was too thick. It was like a living entity, swirling and shifting, hiding whatever lay beyond. "We need to get out of here," Cass whispered, her voice tight with terror. Her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of danger. A low guttural chanting, barely audible above the wind, seemed to be coming from the very heart of the forest. It was as if the ancient trees themselves were whispering secrets of old, filling the air with an eerie, otherworldly presence. Owen grabbed Cass's hand, his own clammy with fear. The dense forest around them seemed to close in, the trees whispering secrets of old. "We need to go! Now!" he hissed, his voice barely audible over the rustling leaves. He pushed open the van door and pulled Cass out after him, the cold night air biting at their skin. They ran, stumbling blindly through the undergrowth, the ground uneven and treacherous. Owen risked a glance over his shoulder, his heart pounding in his chest. He thought he saw something moving in the fog behind them, a shadowy figure that seemed to glide effortlessly. Its eyes, 2 points of malevolent light, bored into him, promising a darkness that chilled him to the bone. Panic seized Owen. He was alone, lost in the fog-choked woods where the trees seemed to whisper secrets. He called out for Cass, his voice hoarse, desperate, echoing through the eerie silence. He ran, blindly, aimlessly, through the dense undergrowth, tripping over roots and branches. He was lost, hopelessly lost, and the forest was closing in on him, its shadows growing darker and more menacing with every step. As Owen lay there, his breath ragged in his throat, he became aware of another sound, faint at first, then growing steadily louder. It was a low, rhythmic thumping, like the beating of a giant heart vibrating through the very ground beneath him. He sat up, his head spinning, and looked around. The fog was beginning to thin, revealing glimpses of the surrounding forest, and that's when he saw it. Hanging from the branch of a nearby tree, swaying gently in the breeze, was a shape that sent a jolt of pure terror through him. It was a figure, wrapped in what appeared to be animal skins, its limbs dangling at unnatural angles. It was impossible to make out any details in the fading light, but Owen could sense its eyes on him, watching him, judging him. And the thumping sound, he realized with a sickening lurch in his stomach, was coming from it. He scrambled to his feet and backed away, his gaze fixed on the grotesque effigy hanging from the tree. He wanted to scream, to run, but his legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot by a fear so primal, so overwhelming, that it stole his breath away. And then the figure spoke, a single word uttered in a language that Owen had never heard before, a language that seemed to slither and coil around his mind like a venomous serpent, but even though he didn't understand the words, he understood their meaning. The word echoed through the forest, seeming to hang in the air long after it had been spoken. Owen felt a cold hand close around his heart, squeezing the air from his lungs. He stumbled back, his eyes darting frantically from side to side, searching for an escape. But the forest seemed to press in on him, hemming him in. As his vision blurred, he thought he saw movement in the depths of the forest. Shadowy figures, tall and gaunt, their eyes burning with an eerie internal light, emerged from behind the trees, their movements fluid and unsettling, like predators stalking their prey. They were chanting, their voices joining with the rhythmic thumping sound, creating a discordant symphony that seemed to reverberate through Owen's very bones. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a primal urge to flee, but his legs refused to obey. He was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by terror as the figures closed in around him. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the chanting stopped. The figures froze, their heads turning in unison towards the edge of the clearing. Owen, his heart pounding in his chest, followed their gaze. And that's when he saw her. She stood at the edge of the clearing, shrouded in mist and shadow, her features obscured by the swirling fog. Her hair, long and dark, flowed around her like a raven's wing, and her dress, a tattered white gown, billowed around her legs as if caught in a phantom breeze. Owen stared, his heart pounding in his chest, his breath catching in his throat. He couldn't tell if she was real or a figment of his fear-addled imagination, a phantom conjured by the forest to torment him. But as he watched, she turned slowly, her head tilting upwards, and for a fleeting moment the fog parted, revealing her face. Her eyes, dark and fathomless, met his across the clearing. They held a strange mixture of sadness and knowing, of ancient wisdom and chilling otherness. In that instant Owen felt a connection to her, a sense of shared understanding that transcended language or reason. He couldn't explain it, but he knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that she was the key to everything, to escaping the forest, to finding Cass, to understanding the nightmare that had ensnared them. But as quickly as the fog had parted, it closed in again, swallowing her from view, leaving Owen alone once more with the chanting figures and the rhythmic thumping that seemed to reverberate through his very bones. The chanting grew louder, more insistent, urging Owen forward. He hesitated for a moment, his gaze fixed on the spot where the woman had been standing, his mind racing. He knew instinctively that he shouldn't trust these figures, that they meant him harm, but what choice did he have? He had to find Cass. He had to escape this nightmare. And something in the woman's eyes, a flicker of knowing, a silent plea, told him that she held the key. Taking a deep breath, Owen plunged into the fog, following the chanting figures deeper into the heart of the ancient, malevolent wood. The forest floor was treacherous, littered with fallen branches, gnarled roots, and moss-covered stones. The fog swirled around his legs, making each step a gamble, but Owen pressed on, driven by a desperate hope that he couldn't quite articulate, even to himself. He didn't know how long he ran, how far he travelled. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the oppressive, fog-choked depths of the forest. His lungs burned, his legs screamed for respite, but still he ran, the chanting figures his only guide, their voices a hypnotic siren song leading him further and further astray. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the chanting stopped. The figures around him froze, their heads turning in unison towards a point behind him. Owen spun around, his heart pounding in his chest, his hand instinctively reaching for the torch that was no longer there. He was standing on the edge of another clearing, smaller than the last, the trees around it forming a tight, suffocating circle. The air here felt different, heavier, charged with a palpable sense of dread, and in the centre of the clearing, bathed in an eerie, otherworldly light that seemed to emanate from the very earth itself, stood the van. It looked different somehow, smaller, older, its once bright paintwork now dull and scratched, the windows dark and opaque. The runes carved into its side seemed to writhe and pulse in the strange light as if imbued with a life of their own. Owen stared at the van, his mind reeling. He had been running for hours, yet he had somehow ended up back where he started. He felt a surge of despair, a crushing sense of hopelessness that threatened to overwhelm him. He was trapped, caught in an endless loop, a prisoner of the forest and its ancient, malevolent guardians. And then he heard it, a voice, soft and low, whispering his name. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, a disembodied whisper that slithered through the trees, worming its way into his mind. Owen. The voice was closer now, more insistent, laced with a chilling familiarity that sent shivers down his spine. Owen, come home. He took a step back, his eyes darting frantically from side to side, searching for the source of the voice, but the forest remained silent, the only sound the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant rhythmic thumping that seemed to echo the beating of his own terrified heart. The sterile white walls of the Travelodge room seemed to pulsate. The hum of the vending machine down the hallway sounded alien after the oppressive silence of the hollow. Owen sat on the edge of the bed, clutching a polystyrene cup of lukewarm tea, his eyes fixed on the wall. He hadn't spoken since they'd fled the forest, hadn't even looked at Cass. Cass unpacked mechanically, her movements jerky, her face pale and drawn. She kept glancing at Owen, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and concern, but she didn't approach him. The memory of the figure in the white dress, the feeling of Owen slipping away from her, the sheer terror of the endless woods kept her rooted to the spot. "Gone!" Owen croaked, finally breaking the silence. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "The van's gone." He looked at Cass, his eyes pleading for understanding, for reassurance that he wasn't losing his mind. "We left it in the car park, remember?" Cass crossed the room and sat beside him, her hand finding his. It was cold, clammy. She squeezed it gently, trying to convey a strength she didn't feel. "The man at the petrol station," she said, her voice catching in her throat. "He said no one goes there. No one comes back." Owen shuddered. The old man's words echoed in his mind. A chill ran down his spine, despite the stifling warmth of the Travelodge room. The hollow. It had felt like a different world, a place where the rules of time and space were fluid, malleable, a place where nightmares walked in the daylight and ancient evils whispered in the wind. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the memories, the chanting, the rhythmic thumping, the figure in the white dress, but the images remained, burned into his mind, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edges of his sanity. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he would never be truly free of Black Hollow. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Owen and Cass tried to rebuild their lives, to forget the terror of Black Hollow. Cass found work as a florist, surrounding herself with the vibrant colours and sweet scents of life. Owen couldn't bear the thought of being confined, of being trapped. He took a job as a delivery driver, finding solace in the open road, the constant motion, a way to outrun the shadows that followed him. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, the woman in the white dress. Her eyes, dark and knowing, seemed to follow him, her voice whispering his name on the wind. And he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, followed, that Black Hollow was waiting for him, patiently, inexorably, like a predator stalking its prey. The note arrived on a Tuesday. It was lying on his doorstep, a single sheet of paper, the words scrawled in a hand he couldn't quite place, yet felt chillingly familiar. "The Hollow waits. You'll come home soon." Owen stared at the note, his blood turning to ice in his veins. He knew with a certainty that defied all logic that it was from her, the woman in the white dress, and he knew with a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach that he had no choice but to obey. Black Hollow was waiting, and he was going home.